Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar. Thank you for convening this hearing. Thank you to the panel. You're all wonderful to be here with us. Mr. Johnson, you mentioned a program that we're really proud of in Connecticut, and that's Platform to Employment, P2E. It's been called. It was featured in a pretty long and robust segment on 60 Minutes about a year ago, 6 months ago, and it's now being expanded and modeled across the country. And the concept is twofold. One, that these are different workers and they need a level of support service around them that is just distinct from what shorter-term unemployed need, and that's expensive. But second, that, and we talked about this across the panel, that you got to do something different with employers, that you actually have to go out and find employers who are willing to take workers on a temporary basis, a trial basis, and allow the workers to prove that they can overcome the stigma that has been associated with the long-term unemployed. And so I just sort of wanted to, you mentioned in your testimony, and I wanted to sort of ask you to sort of expand upon that model, which is a program both which recognizes the social necessity of dealing with the emotional issues that come with being unemployed for a long period of time, but specifically the project that they have underway in Connecticut and across the country to do trial periods of employment subsidized by the program, with the hopes that at the end of that trial period the stigma is removed and the employment becomes permanent.
Yeah, in our area, a year ago, we did an extensive survey to try to drill into what everyone was talking about is the skills gap, and contacted quite a number of employers representing actually about 25% of all the jobs in our area. And we really wanted to drill into the specific technical skills and which credential are you looking for, et cetera. And actually, what we got back, despite our best efforts, was something that we've learned 20-some years ago. It still came back to the critical set of skills, which often has been called soft skills. And it really boiled down to how they fit within that organization and their willingness to continue to learn and interact and communicate. And so, yes, there are specific skills. They were high on STEM skills. They needed those kinds of things as background. But how do I judge this person's effectiveness on my job? The only way to see that is to try them out firsthand, to witness their work and their relationships. We have a number of tools currently to work with that, on-the-job training contracts where that employer becomes the employer of record, and then we cost share some of the wages. We've been able to get some employers to be enticed with that, but others, they still feel that there is a buyer's market in terms of number of people that are applying for these jobs, and so they really just want to sort out before they make that commitment. And we felt that, I know I connected to Tom Long, who is one of the proponents and original developers of Platform to Employment. This would be a better relationship where we could start out with that person on the provider's payroll for the first 2 months. If that's working, we've got the right person. Now let's build the skills and cost share that for the next several months. And the reports I've gotten is that that's an excellent way to build a relationship.
Dr. Hall, you're the dissenting voice on this panel in terms of the skills gap, and it's driven for a lot of us by anecdotal feedback from employers, but there's certainly data there as well. Just expand a little bit, if you could, on why you essentially come to this panel with the conclusion that this is really a much bigger issue about economic growth and not an issue about the skills gap.
Yeah, in my view, the part that dominates the number of long-term unemployed is simply there just hasn't been enough economic growth, enough job growth. It doesn't mean that there won't be skills gap that will become apparent once the economy gets stronger, once the labor market starts to grow quicker. But the sort of thing that I worry about, and it's somewhat shaded by my experience, I guess, at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you're going to spend money training people, you need to be sure that there are actually jobs there. I'm reminded of the old joke about the atheist at his funeral, all dressed up and no place to go. Right, if you're going to train people, you need to be realistic about the jobs. When I was there, there was a green job training program. They had $500 million to spend on green job training. It hit my radar screen because that's about the entire budget of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Inspector General put out a report after they'd spent about $170 million of that, saying, hey, look, people aren't getting jobs. You should maybe take a look to see if there really is a need for green skills and maybe decide not to spend the rest of this money. They've spent the rest of the money, and they've placed about 30,000 people into jobs. All right, so that's one of my big concerns right now, is there just isn't a lot of job growth. You need to be sure that there are going to be jobs out there for people to get, and you train people for the right.
But I guess I mean, there's, if I could ask just one additional question. It's one thing to address the wrong skills gap, right? And maybe that's the wrong skills gap. It's another thing to suggest that there's not a skills gap. And so I guess I'm asking is, what's the data that drives your conclusion that this is not a matter of a disconnect between skills and job openings?
Sure. Well, when I look at the data on the number of long-term unemployed, it is really huge, and in fact, it is actually worse than it appears. There are about 4.6 million who are long-term unemployed. There are probably millions more who are long-term jobless, people who aren't actively looking because they've been unemployed for a long time. So this is a really big problem. But if you look at something just basic, have we had enough economic growth to support enough job growth to really get us into recovery? And the answer is no. At this current rate of job creation, to get back to the same employment ratio that we had before the recession, it's going to be a decade. That's a really long time, and that's really not strong enough job growth to really start to get people back to work.
Okay, sure, Dr. Hulse.
If I can just comment on this, I don't think there's a disagreement among us on this issue, because I also said in my testimony, if I had to pick one factor that's the strongest factor, it is joblessness and the lack of GDP growth to support job creation. I do think, having said that, there's some significant piece of the unemployment, maybe a percentage point in the aggregate, that does reflect this skill imbalance. And in fact, I think the most effective training programs, again, as Senator Klobuchar said at the outset, the ones where you're actively working hand in hand with employers to meet needs and where they indicate that the training is for specific jobs, those are not likely to suffer from the problem that Dr. Hall is raising. So I don't think those are inconsistent views. And I also think, as I sort of, the skill mismatch has so many other effects on inequality, on wage growth, and even on the willingness of employers to create jobs in America. If you take that famous Siemens plant that was built in North Carolina that President Obama has talked about in his State of the Union, Siemens would not build a plant until they went to North Carolina and made agreements with the UNC system and the community colleges to create a stream of well-trained engineers and technicians to fill those jobs. So in other words, the job creation may not happen if the skills won't be there to meet them. And I think those systems, but it's a multi-pronged problem, and I think we all agree on that.
Thank you, Senator.